visualization and analysis of graphs and how you can use them in order to draw conclusions and draw inferences on printed data that you find. And specifically in this lesson, I'm going to be relating it to the death tolls seen in 3 countries during World War I and World War II. The US, the UK, and Germany. First off, when you're presented with printed data, not in any visual format which you can readily compare against something else, you want to select, in this scenario, I mean in other scenarios you'd be selecting different things, but you want to select the countries and data you wish to compare. I mean, are you going to compare World War I to World War II, one country to another? You want to select the appropriate graph for how you want to compare the two. For instance, bar graphs, they're excellent for standalone values, i.e. total number of deaths. Pie charts, best used to show percentages, percent data of starting populations, a very dark class. Although pie charts aren't only limited to percentages, and line graphs used to show change over time. Now I want everyone to take a look at the data sheet I've handed out, just the front side right now. And I've given you some very base statistics for World War I population, World War II population, as well as the deaths experienced by each of these, and the percent of the population that was killed by the end of the war. Basically, this exercise, it's going to show you how you can use graphs and different visual representations for analysis and observations. When you're looking at a graph and you're comparing 2 different things in it, does anything stand out that shocks you? I mean, what does it imply? What inferences can you draw? If none are apparent, what other comparisons can you make with other data? And does this reveal anything? And use a variety of visual aids, because the more visual aids you use, the more you'll get an understanding of the relationship between different events, different places, and different statistics that you'll run across. And I have some examples here. Basic comparison. This is directly from the data that you guys have in front of you. These are the populations pre-conflict for all 3, the US, the UK, and Germany, for World War I and World War II. World War I being the green bar, and World War II being the purple bar. As you can see, it's in millions of people. Right off the bat, is there anything interesting that you notice in the graph, like that stands out right away?
US has the biggest population.
US has the biggest population, yes, but they also have the most drastic change in population from World War I to World War II, whereas the other 2 can stay relatively close. I mean, they do grow, but not as much as the US does. So what can you infer just from this graph, without any foreknowledge of World War I and World War II? What do you know just from this graph?
Seems like a lot of people went to the United States after World War I.
Yeah, that's one reason, yeah. Is there anything else? Anything else anyone notices?
UK and Germany were worse affected.
Yeah,
Couldn't grow.
obviously you can see their rate of growth isn't exactly skyrocketing like the US's. Go on to a second one. The pie chart for populations pre-conflict, and this one just focuses on World War I in millions of people. Now, this is a pie chart that doesn't use percentages, but just having these 3 put together, it gives you a better idea of the populations and how they stacked up against each other, as opposed to the bars I just showed you. I mean, looking at that, what was that?
Half of the population.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
It said US seems to have almost just about half of
Yeah.
the population.
I mean, when you look at it in the big picture, the UK and Germany barely outmatch the US. And I mean, I know we're not thinking in terms of the UK and Germany against the US, but just looking at this comparison, the US is quite a formidable force, even in World War I. Just in terms of population, just in terms of base population. So are there any other inferences that you can draw just from this graph? I know I've already kind of touched on a couple.
Well, in both world wars, like both the wars, the U.S. joined in very late, whereas the U.K. and Germany were involved in it from the beginning.
Yeah, and that, with foreknowledge, that's something that you can infer as you know that. And you know that's why the U.S. has such a larger base population than maybe some other countries would. Maybe it's for some other reason. Maybe it's from economic growth, maybe increased immigration. But that's definitely one of the reasons.
Maybe that shows why U.S. had such a positive effect when they joined on the side of Britain.
Yeah. Here we have another bar graph. This is the death tolls between World War I and World War II. Millions of people. You can see it. You can see it right in front of you on your sheet. But what jumps out at you on this? Germany. What about it? Yeah. I mean, how many died in World War II?
6 million.
As compared to in World War I, it was less than 2.5 million.
Still alive.
And down there, what is it? The UK. Looks like the UK dropped off.
Yeah, they like saved about like half more lives, like half less than half people died.
Now, by looking at that, seeing the larger bar on World War I and the lower bar on World War II for the UK, what can you infer about that?
One was heavily involved in combat situations in World War II. The UK wasn't in World War II as compared to World War I.
Yeah, you could say that. You could also
Fighting might not have taken place in their home country.
that too. That's very true. And you also have to remember the gap of time between the two wars too. I mean, from 1919 to when the pre-war statistics were taken for these 1939 for the population statistics. There's a lot of advancement going on in the country at this point. There's new weaponry, there's new defenses, there's new ideas going all around the world, and all those can contribute to the fact that their death rate in the Second War was lower, where in both of the other ones it was higher. Is there anything interesting about the U.S.?
Their death toll was higher in the second one than the first one.
Is that interesting, or
And more than double.
it's more than double? But what jumps out of
No, sorry. Prior knowledge, the U.S. didn't get involved until 1917. The war ended in 1918.
and that's why there's such a low number of casualties there. Like with that foreknowledge, you can make those inferences and identify things that you wouldn't normally know just by staring at this sheet of statistics. You wouldn't be able to make comparisons as you would with visual aids like pie charts and bar graphs. It makes it a lot easier to view. It makes it a lot easier to draw inferences and discuss it. And ultimately, it gives you a tool to compare different but alike situations, and it's a very important, very useful tool for noticing trends and effects.
And